to college, but also into their first jobs where they don't always know, what the company they're going to go work for is like. Do you have any advice about that? Or, again, how do you kind of, I mean, stumbling is good that you got there, right? But sometimes you want to take some of the randomness out. So do you have any advice for that portion?
Your first job is absolutely not your last job. In fact, like the likelihood that you'll be in your first job for more than 2 years is pretty low. And so the things that you should optimize in your first job are the team you're going to work with and your manager, because that manager ultimately is going to be the person that decides in those first 2 years the opportunities you're going to get, the mentorship you're going to get, the recommendation that you're going to get afterwards. And so in those first 2 years, while they don't matter necessarily what you're doing, but like what you get access to does really matter in those first 2 years after you graduate. And so the team and the manager that you're going to get is super, super important. And then the second thing to optimize for is ability to learn, right? Like, what am I going to learn in this role? How much are they going to give me to learn? And not to shame any of the big tech companies, but oftentimes when you go to a big tech company, you're focusing on like a widget of a widget of a widget, and like I know so many people that work like 5 hours a
You're the
week.
you're the 200,000th engineer of a
Yeah,
of a
like
process.
the amount that you're going to learn in that same like 2 year period as maybe a peer that goes to a scrappier type of environment is much less. And so I would optimize for like ability to learn and also the team that you're going to work for. And then balance that, of course, with like whatever your monetary needs are. Like that is also be like you have to be really realistic about. So that's that's kind of what I would say. And like the last thing I guess is not to be too hung up on a particular outcome. Like I ended up working at like I started working at an ed tech company, and then I went into venture, which I had no plans in any way, shape, or form to pursue venture. It wasn't even, if I told you my list of top 10 interests, venture would not have been that when I graduated college. Um, and it might not even have been in my top 50. So I wouldn't anchor or get too obsessed about anything in particular. Just focus on, hey, is this interesting work? Am I going to learn a lot? And am I going to work with really great people that I enjoy spending time with?
So I was wondering if maybe you could talk about how community has helped you. And then again, I was wondering if you could also tie that in because I know you mentioned that you tend to actually be an introvert. And so, again, introvert and community can sometimes feel diametrically opposed. I was wondering if you could maybe kind of unpack that a bit.
Yeah. So, in terms of the role of community for me, that has been, one of the single most important things to me in my life in particular has been so important to me in terms of my ability to be resilient and persevere when things get really hard. Actually having someone that understands what you're going through and be able to empathize what you're going through and be there for you matters deeply. And having someone also at the same time be able to tell you when you're messing up and call you out when you're doing things in a way that are not aligned with what they know are your core beliefs, that's also incredibly important. And so having that friendship has been just so important to even getting to school, staying through college, being able to succeed in the workplace, having someone to bounce ideas off of. Because I have an incredibly loving family that I care really deeply for, but sometimes they don't understand the intricacies of life and venture or life at Stanford, et cetera. And so they can be there from an emotional perspective, but not really understand like the day to day intricacies. And so those friendships for me like are very incredibly important. And I feel like I've developed communities across my career. Like I remember when I was in my first venture job, I had my set of friends in that workplace where we were each other's group. We took care of each other. We were the ones that had our own little Slack group or group chat, and like would be like, did you see what X and Y person did? And it's just like you kind of need that in the workplace. And so I think leaning on people and having some form of support group is just incredibly important to be able to get through sticky situations, but also to be able to celebrate when things are great.
I think you mentioned that, the average skill set now will be kind of obsolete every 5 years. And then you also at the same time kind of have an idea of like a new career stack. right? And what I thought was really cool about it was, you'd think that a lot of career centers would have something like this, but that doesn't actually exist at most places of like, how do you build kind of these components? And so I was wondering if you could maybe walk through those different components and then also how they intersect with like your what you call your three enablers of mobility, which is learning, professional identity, and then the big keyword, which is always community.
I've been thinking about, okay, what is empowered economy 2.0, like new career cycle? Like, how does this change? How does the workforce dynamics change? And for me, I really came down to it's going to be really hard to be able to train and reallocate talent at the scale that we're going to have to as a country without actually having some form of skills engine that can power that change. And by a skills engine, I mean something that can actually get a sense of what are the skills people have, what are the skills that we need, and how do we close that delta as quick as possible, that then powers the rest of our education to employment landscape, including our learning providers and what's happening in companies, etc. This is not answering your question, but it's more to say like that piece of work is constantly evolving. But to the point around the career stack, I would say like the primary, I put there's the circle that has three different components, which talks about first exploration, which is like how do you even figure out what career path to do? Then it's like how do you get into that career path? And then how do you succeed and thrive in that career path? And that's kind of the phases of the way to think about the career. And then the enablers on the other side, our community, as we've now talked about, which is like who are the people that help you thrive, your professional identity, which is like where's the place that you even host your identity, which for most people these days is LinkedIn. And then the third enabler is actually the learning that you do, both like before you even enter into the workplace, and then also the learning that happens throughout your time in the workplace. And so for someone that is actually actively in college, the way that like the pieces that I would spend the most time on or put the most emphasis on are like going back to actually where we kind of started this conversation is that exploration piece, which is how do you understand yourself? How do you understand what you care about? Take out like what you think you should do, take out what take out what like other people are doing.
A lot of times students, if they do want to go into venture, it's very difficult if you don't go to a set of schools. And so, thinking about that is like, how do you have a growth hack to break through? And my thought was, well, what if could social media be that leveling playing field where you can establish yourself in college, establish a personal brand, a conversation, and that's what kind of elevates you outside of the, oh, I didn't just go to, these 4 or 5 schools that typically get selected from. So.
Yeah, it's certainly one way. I mean, God knows what's going to happen with Twitter now. But by the way, and like the other thing too is, I think that Twitter or LinkedIn, most of the social media, DMs are getting flooded for everyone involved, and so I think it's like even harder now to break out from the noise. But if you do a good job of building out a brand, and not just a brand of being the loudest on Twitter, but actually like talking about meaningful things, writing about meaningful things, you can also break out from the noise. Beyond social media, I've also seen really interesting tactics that folks have taken by most of our emails, including my email, you can find on the internet. I put it on almost every article that I write. And so, or you can guess it for most people. It's usually first name at thefirm.com. And so I've had so many people reach out to me and actually put together, hey, I have a thesis on this space. Here are like 6 slides that I've put together on this thesis, companies that I think may be interesting. And I'm sending this to you because it seems like it's an area that you're interested in as well. Any chance you might be up for a 20-minute conversation about this? That's a really powerful way to try to get a conversation, right? Like you're immediately offering me information that is relevant to me. You clearly have put in the work to understand this space. And so that already puts you in a much better position than someone that sends an email and says, hey, I would love to hop on a call for an informational interview. I don't have all the time in the day. And so like just hopping on a call for an informational interview is like really like I have to really think about, okay, do I have the time in my calendar to be able to take this? And so I think there are like really good ways to try to break out from the noise that don't even need to involve social media. I've also seen people reach out and send specific companies to offer introductions to. Hey, like I've seen you are focused on this category. You wrote this email, you wrote this article about this space. I found this company that seems to be in your stage and sector focus. I know the founder. Would you be interested in an intro? That's also another potential way. Or, hey, I notice your portfolio companies like this one, this one, this one are hiring a head of product, a head of CS, and this one. I thought like these folks might be good candidates for those roles. Like, let me know what you think. Would love to make an introduction. Again, just like a way of building a connection that is rooted in shared mutual interest, as opposed to I'm going to reach out to you and immediately ask you for something.